Peace and blessings. Welcome back to the channel once again, where we talk all things health and healing from a holistic perspective, and today will be no different. Now, in the previous video, I talked about some of the top warning signs that you're either about to have a stroke or you're having a stroke. Now, this is hugely important because not only can this save your life, but this can save the life of somebody you love, your mother, your father, your husband, your wife, your daughter, because even children are having strokes at your early ages now as well too. Okay, and when I say children, depending on how old you are, they can be in their 20s and have a stroke, but this could save your life and somebody's life you love. Now, as I explained in that video, a person has a stroke every 40 seconds. So in the time that I've been on this video with you, one person has had a stroke. Okay, so it's hugely important. This is a huge issue, one of the top causes of death. All right. Now let's jump into what I'm going to be explaining to you today. Last time I gave you the warning signs, okay, that a stroke is happening. So now you need to seek medical attention because you're in a state of emergency. Well, now I'm going to give you the source because today we're going to talk about the actual causes. This is the form of prevention or a holistic approach to this. And as I tell you, in holistic medicine or a holistic approach to healing, you have to address the cause. If you're not addressing the cause, you're doing nothing. Okay, you're always working backwards. Okay, so we're going to talk about the causes, and then we're going to get into some of the solutions, which I think is hugely important. Natural solutions to making sure that you're not only understanding what happens when you get these warning signs that you're having a stroke, but now you understand how to prevent them as well too. So let's first start with, what are the top causes of stroke? What are the primary causes of stroke? There are two. The first is a blocked artery. What blocks the artery? A blood clot. As I stated in the other video, 85% of strokes, 85% of them are caused by blood clots. So we're going to do a deep dive into how blood clots form and why. Okay. The other reason you can have a blockage is because a piece of plaque has broken off. So let's say you have plaque in your arteries as a result of eating too much saturated fat, which comes from animal products, as a result of eating too much processed foods and trans fats. Okay, that plaque will start to build up. Okay, and it also can come from damage to the inner lining of those arteries. Whenever that inner lining of the artery gets damaged, it has to be repaired. Okay, so just imagine, you get a tear in the artery, that tear has to be repaired. And guess what repairs it? Cholesterol. Okay, so the more micro tears you have in your arteries, the more plaque or cholesterol that comes in there, patches it up. You get another layer, and then another layer, and another layer. And before you know it, the artery becomes occluded where it has no flow through it. Okay, that can cause a blockage as well too. Now, what's important to know and understand that these blood clots could be of two kinds. They could be local, meaning it happens, that blood clot could form right there. Let's say if you have a stroke, which happens in the brain, it forms in the brain. And when it forms, that blood clot is called a thrombosis. Or that blood clot could come from somewhere else. It could come from the leg, okay? Travel through the bloodstream, end up in the brain, and we'll call that a thrombosis, okay? That's why we call it, when somebody has a blood clot in the lungs, they call it a pulmonary embolism as well too. And we'll get into that in just a second. So it depends on where the clot originates. You change up the names, but at the end of the day, it is a blood clot, okay? The second primary cause of stroke is going to be as a result of the artery either bursting or leaking, okay? Bursting or leaking, and that can come from a variety of ways too, which we'll get into. Now, those are the two of the primary causes of stroke, but it's really important to understand that there's something that leads to the causes. All right, so let's talk about some of the things that increase your risk for having a blood clot or blockage or causing one of your arteries to burst or leak, okay? Number one, stress. Now, I started with that one because that's the one that people least worry about. People have normalized stress, and there's a good kind of stress, like working out. Then there's a bad kind of stress, like actually stressing out about life. And we stress way too much today, okay? And as a result of that, it creates these effects that lead to an increase in us actually having strokes. Let me explain how stress can lead to a stroke. And this is really important because this is mostly mental, all right? And the reason why that's so important is because A, you can think your way into disease, okay? Because that's the point I'm trying to show you, is that healing is a mindset. Just the same way disease is a mindset, all right? So when you create a mindset that includes stress above the level that is normal or healthy for you, then you have you have leaned toward a disease forming mindset. Okay, so when you stress the body, it triggers a lot of reactions in the body. Okay, primarily the sympathetic, region of the body that increases the heartbeat. Okay, as it increases the heartbeat, because you're in the stress state. Just think about it. If you were in a car accident, your body will be stressed. You will be breathing hard. Your heart rate will be up. Okay, but most people are in this state constantly. They don't even have to have a car crash. They're creating these stressful moments in their life. This person's maybe over here thinking about me like this. My boss at the job wants to fire me. They're constantly creating these reasons to stress. Okay, and as a result, they have a stressful life. So this is going to stimulate that area of the body known as the sympathetic nervous system to increase the heart rate. That makes the heart work harder, which is going to increase blood pressure, okay? Which is also going to increase the amount of sugar and cholesterol that is in the blood. This makes the blood thicker, okay? Viscous, okay? Your blood is supposed to be like water. That's why when you come into the hospital and you're dehydrated, we give you a saline solution, which is water with salt, okay? And you know that the blood is a little salty. So this is why, using a saline bath works to rehydrate somebody, okay? Because 90% of blood is water, all right? But if you start putting a whole bunch of sugar and cholesterol in it, now that blood becomes like a sugary beverage like Kool-Aid, like Coca-Cola, all right? Now it's really thick. You pour it out on the cabinet, it will clump up. That's the same thing that your blood is doing as well too. So you have to understand that stress, literally just creating stress in your mind, okay? Because we all meet that cool person who is always cool on the inside and the outside. Stress levels are like this, all right? So you can create and manifest dis-ease in your life by simply having a stressful mind state or a disease-based mind state. So it's hugely important to know that that is a risk factor, stress. Number 2, diabetes. And you're going to see how these things are connected as well too. As I told you before, with stress, one of the things that stress does is increase the amount of sugar that is in the blood. And what is diabetes? An elevated level of blood sugar, okay? Making the blood thicker. Blood gets thicker has a more increased probability of clotting, clumping together. All right. Not only with diabetes, but also excess estrogen in the body as well too. That could come from the type of foods that you eat. That can come from using a whole bunch of plastics. That can come from a number of things, okay? It can come from birth control as well too, hormone therapy, but elevated levels of estrogen in the body could actually increase your risk for stroke as well too. This is why when women take birth control pills, you'll notice that one of the side effects is it increases the risk for blood clots, okay? Because birth control pills have estrogen in them, okay? We're noticing a lot of men are actually having elevated levels of estrogen instead of elevated levels of testosterone as well too. And as you will hear in the previous video, women have a much higher propensity to have a stroke than men as a result of this, the more likelihood of having more estrogen in the body, okay? So that's another risk factor. Number 2, obesity. Obesity increases your risk for stroke by 2 times, okay? It doubles your risk for stroke, okay? So obesity isn't just an aesthetic thing, it's also a biochemical thing that could lead to you having a stroke as well too. Also, pregnancy. During pregnancy, and why? Because not our, but women's hormone levels change, during pregnancy. And you'll see all types of shifts in the body. Okay, so as a result, you'll see also an increased risk for stroke for women who are pregnant too, especially when they're unhealthy. If you're healthy, no worries. Okay. Also, high blood pressure. High blood pressure is also an increased risk factor. High cholesterol, also an increased risk factor. Remember what I said about stress? Increases blood sugar, increases cholesterol in the blood. Okay. Also, smoking and alcohol. As much as people have heard that a drink a day keeps the doctor away or is good for heart health, trust me, when you do the studies, when you look at the studies that are not biased, when you look at the meta-analysis around the study of heart health and alcohol, it increases the risk of cardiovascular disease, including stroke. Okay, hugely important. Now, I want to tie something in because I'm always telling you guys how insulin resistance plays a huge role when it comes to dis-ease in our body. Let's think about what insulin resistance is involved in all of the risk factors I just named. Okay, and insulin resistance is when your body becomes resistant to insulin taking sugar from the blood into the cell, okay, which is going to elevate the level of blood sugar, okay, your blood sugar level. All right, so insulin resistance related to the risk factors that I just mentioned is related to diabetes, okay, it's related to obesity. All right, it's related to estrogen, excess estrogen in the body as well too. All right, it's related to high blood pressure, and it's related to elevated levels of cholesterol. So literally, you correcting the insulin resistance problem could alleviate almost half of the symptoms that I mentioned today. All right, so that's going to be in the solutions that I'll talk about a little bit later. Hugely important. You have to understand the problem often tells you what the solution is. And that's what I'm always trying to help you guys see here. The problem it always tells on itself. It tells you what the solution is, all right? But we're gonna dive a little bit deeper and I'm gonna explain a little bit why that is. And the reason why is, well, first let's start off with what is a blood clot, because 85% of strokes are caused by blood clots. And a blood clot is a coagulation or clumping of blood cells with this protein called fibrin, okay? And here's the thing, tying back to insulin resistance. Insulin resistance decreases the enzyme that actually breaks down fibrin, okay? And again, I'm gonna rewind again so you can make sure you get this. A blood clot is the coagulation, the clumping, the sticking together of blood cells with this protein called fibrin. And when you are insulin resistant, and we know that insulin resistance causes high blood pressure, elevated levels of cholesterol. It also causes obesity and diabetes. So when you are insulin resistant, which could be showing up as high blood pressure, could be showing up as obesity, could be showing up as diabetes, etc. When you are insulin resistant, it decreases the enzyme that breaks down fibrin. So it essentially inhibits the process of what is called fibrinolysis, the breakdown of fibrin. So the more fibrin you have, the more likely you are for your cells to clump up and create a clot. Now, what's hugely important to understand is that on one side of the coin, clotting is a natural process. When we cut ourselves and bleed, we have to clot so the blood will stop. But it's only when the process becomes doubled up that we get in trouble. And so what's important to know is when we have this excess fibrin as a result of insulin resistance, sometimes that could be leading to this coagulation. Again, this is why I'm telling you, like, the problem always tells you what the solution is, okay? Now, here's the thing about blood clots. If the blood clot is in the heart, we call it a heart attack. If the blood clot is in the brain, we call it a stroke. If the blood clot is in the leg, we call it a DVT, a deep vein thrombosis, okay? And if the blood clot is in the lungs, like I mentioned before, we call it a pulmonary embolism, okay? So it's hugely important. Understand, a lot of times we create all of these fancy names for different things, but essentially what all of this is, a heart attack, a stroke, a pulmonary embolism, a DVT, all of this is it's a blood clot somewhere in the body wreaking havoc. That's the best way, the simplest way to look at it. All right. Now, what I want to do before I get into the solutions is this. I want to give you 10 signs that you have a blood clot. 10 signs that you have a blood clot. The reason why that's important is because, again, the same way I gave you the warning signs that you are either about to have a stroke or having a stroke, this is going to help you prevent this blood clot from becoming a heart attack, becoming a stroke, becoming an embolism, recognizing a DVT, okay, a deep vein thrombosis. So if you understand the signs and symptoms of a blood clot, then you can then say, okay, I may be having some issues. I'll give you a quick story. Friend of mine reached out to me. A girl was having problems. She was having anxiety attacks, and she was also having issues with breathing and coughing. She started coughing a lot and had issues breathing. It felt like it was difficult to breathe. She had a little bit of chest pain, all right? I unfortunately was out of town, and I asked a few questions. After I go through and find out what all those symptoms that I just mentioned to you were, I had asked, has she been on birth control or how long? Okay, was she on any blood thinners? And a few other questions. And so I told her, I said, well, if I were you, I'm not in a place to kind of give you any advice because I'm not your doctor, but go to your doctor and ask to check to see if you have a blood clot. Because she was having all the symptoms that I just mentioned, that I'm going to mention again. And then she was on medication that could cause blood clots. Sure enough, the next day she's going to go to the doctor. Her mom walks in the room to get her, and she sees her daughter. She's reaching out to her, and she collapses, falls, passes away. She had a pulmonary embolism, okay? She had all of some of the signs that I'm about to mention. So this is why it's so important, okay? Signs and symptoms: fatigue, just feel tired out of nowhere. Varicose veins, redness and swelling in the legs. That could be a DVT that I mentioned before. Now, if that thrombosis dislodges and goes to the lung, now you got a pulmonary embolism, okay? Also, shortness of breath, or like unexplained shortness of breath, okay? Not if you've been running a marathon, but all of a sudden you barely can breathe. You got chest tightness and chest pain. You got pain when you're breathing. All of a sudden, come out of nowhere, no phlegm, just a problem with that, okay? That is a definite sign that you need to kind of be careful about, all right? Anxiety attacks. Why do you have an anxiety attack? When you can't breathe, you're going to be in a state of anxiety. That's exactly what's happening. That's what happened, unfortunately, with this person who passed away. They were having these anxiety attacks because they had a pulmonary embolism, okay? Also, sweats and fever out of nowhere as well too. Fainting and dizziness as well too. All of a sudden you just faint and passed out. Maybe you're not getting enough oxygen to the tissues, because although you may have the embolism in the heart, the brain, or even the lungs, it's not fully occluding the area. So some of the tissues is actually getting some saturation of oxygen and nutrients. And then when it fully occludes, all of a sudden you pass out. You get dizzy, or even before it fully occludes. Okay, so that's why you can have those. Rapid heart rate. Your heart rate is supposed to be between 60 and 100 beats. If all of a sudden you see your heart rate is around 125, 150, and you're just sitting there resting, it could be a possible blood clot as well too. Persistent cough. Always coughing all the time, and it comes out of nowhere. It's unexplained. No phlegm coming up, just feeling like you always have to cough, okay? It could be a clot in the lungs as well too. And then coughing up blood. If you cough and then blood comes up, okay? No throat issues, just unexplained. You cough and you're fine and blood comes up, it could be an actual blood clot in the lungs as well too. And then skin, warm to the touch, especially in the legs. So if you reach down and you notice comparatively to every other part of your body, there's there's pain in that area of the leg and it's also warm to the touch, it could be a possible blood clot or DVT as well too. So those are some of the signs and symptoms. Now, you may have one of these, but it doesn't mean that you have a blood clot. You could just be tired because you're tired, okay? You can have shortness of breath because you got a lot of phlegm in your lungs, okay? But if you have a combination of these symptoms, it is something to be concerned about. Go see your physician, all right? So let's jump into some of the solutions. Well, solution number one, I talked about. You got to correct the insulin resistance issue, and most people have an insulin resistance issue. And this isn't something when you go get a checkup at your doctor that they're going to check, are you insulin resistant? They may check your blood sugars. They may even check your A1C, but they may not give you a picture as to are you insulin resistant, because your body is constantly compensating and adapting, okay? All right, so it's really important. Correct your insulin resistance issue, because again, it leads to high blood pressure, it leads to weight issues, obesity, and it also leads to diabetes because your blood sugars elevate. And when you correct your insulin resistance issues, you can lower your blood pressure, you can reduce your weight, and you also can reduce their blood sugar levels, which means that you can take care of high blood pressure, obesity, and diabetes by just simply correcting your insulin resistance issue and stop eating all those refined carbohydrates. All right. Number two, now this is the big one. For those of you who are on blood thinners out there, like say for instance, one of the oldest blood thinners is Coumadin, okay? And when you're on Coumadin, you'll notice one thing that is very interesting. I noticed this as soon as, I was coming out of school and having to counsel patients. One of the things you have to always counsel a patient on if they're on a drug like Coumadin is you have to be careful about the amount of green leafy vegetables you eat. And one day a patient asked me, because they really didn't teach us why. They just told us to tell people, if you're taking Coumadin, you got to eat the same amount of green leafy vegetables that you've always eaten. Well, the truth is, green leafy vegetables make your blood thin, okay? They keep your blood thin like it's supposed to be. Your blood, again, is supposed to be thin like water, okay? Thin like water, not like syrup, okay? And so the more green leafy vegetables you're eating, it makes the blood thinner, okay? Now, the reason why they tell you don't eat more green leafy vegetables than you should is because then you're taking the effect of the drug, which is thinning the blood, and now you're eating more green leafy vegetables, and that's making it too thin, and that could actually increase your risk, not only for bleeding, but it also can increase your risk for having a heart attack or stroke too when your blood is too thin. Everything in the body is about balance, homeostasis, okay? So one of the ways you can thin the blood is by eating more green leafy vegetables, more salads, more green smoothies, more green juices, eating more green leafy vegetables. Now, if you're on a drug like Coumadin, where you have to monitor the amount of green leafy vegetables you're eating, you then have to work with your physician before you increase the amount of green leafy vegetable, because you don't want the effect of the drug to take you to a place in your health where you could increase your risk for strokes or heart attacks. So you got to work with your physician on that, or your healthcare provider. All right. Number three, you got to stop eating junk and gunk that makes the blood so thick. You got to eat to cleanse, not to clog. Most of the food that people are eating today they're clogging up their entire body, which is why they're so fatigued, which is why the blood is so thick and why the blood clumps up. Okay? Stop eating junk and gunk, processed food, a lot of sugar, a lot of oils. Okay? You do not need to eat oils at all. You do not need to eat any oils. You can get all of the healthy fats that they tell you get from oils from eating the things that oils come from, like olives, avocados, nuts, and seeds. Eat the actual nut and seed, the avocado, okay? Instead of using the oil so much, because those things are horrible to your blood vessels, okay? To your vascular system, okay? So stop eating junk and gunk, okay? Get rid of it. And especially the sugary beverages, Okay, people forget to talk about those. But when you put a sugary beverage in your body, you're not hydrating yourself. You're actually dehydrating yourself. You're elevating the blood sugars and causing so many issues that you don't know. So you got to stop eating the junk and gunk. And the last thing, start drinking tea with ginger and cayenne pepper. All right, cayenne pepper has salicylic acid in it, which has been shown to make the blood thin. Okay, salicylic acid, if it sounds familiar, that's what you find in things like aspirin. Okay, and they tell you to take an aspirin a day to make the blood thin to prevent heart attacks and stroke. Well, you get those things from food too. So you can drink your ginger and cayenne pepper tea, and that'll actually help as well too. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this. Until the next time, peace and blessings. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. Make sure you share this with somebody you love, you care about, so that we can affect not only you, who is in search of health and healing and a holistic approach to keeping and reclaiming your health, but share this with people you love so that we can change the world. Until the next time, peace and blessings and Godspeed.